Well, folks, it's time for more card reviews, including this cool new legendary for Paladin, Paladin the Scarlet, a 3-mana 2/2 with Rush, and pretty nifty effect here. Whenever this gains attack or health, double it wherever this card is. So this guy basically helps you scale any buffs, whether those are board buffs, hand buffs, or even deck buffs. So something like Invigorating Sermon, a card you might have forgot in standard format. So yeah, if you play this guy with Blessing of Authority, it's going to give him 16 in stats, making him total at 18 for a 3 mana. Now, of course, you got to spend on that Blessing too, but it clearly can scale pretty crazily. Now, I think that is actually not the most common use case here. I think it's really going to be more just like Alliance Bannerman and Jewel Kit, those small 1/1 buffs stacking up so that you're able to play this guy. You know, maybe if you've coined a Bannerman on 2, play this on 3 or 4 or even 5, and he's like a 5/5 or a 6/6, and you're pretty happy to have a 3-mana 6/6 with Rush that might stick around for that Blessing of Authority or for some Librams of Wisdom and start just stacking up. So whether it's Libram Paladin or a more traditional hand buff Paladin, I think both use cases, because of the Rush and the ability to put those stats into play immediately, Paladin's got some big upside. And that lingering threat of leaving him behind, turning, every Hand of a Doll into like 4 extra damage that could either go face or just make this guy super scary. I think that's pretty cool. I think this is a really good card that fits naturally into all the Paladin game plans that we currently see. There's also now like the Lightborn Cariel hero card with that hero power that gives +4/+4 in hand. This guy could get +8/+8 every time. There will be scenarios where getting this guy to 30/30 is not that absurd based on High Lord Bolvar and all these other cards. So I like this one a lot. I think it's actually really promising and a great fit with some absolutely mega high roll potential, essentially, on making him enormous. All right, speaking of cards that are really cool, I love this one. Shadowward Devour for Priest, a new 1-mana shadow spell. With this one, you choose a minion, and it steals 1 health from all other minions. So kind of borrowing from Ancient Voidhound here a little bit, stealing health. No attack in this case, but health is still amazing. So, the perfect use cases for this are like your opponent has a board full of 1/1s. In the early game, you have a Sethic Veilweaver on board, and you buff your Sethic Veilweaver while also clearing your opponent's stuff, giving you a really high health minion to work with that also might just protect like a Sethic where you're going to get a ton of value return out of it. There's also like the Nazmani for Priest at 3 that would be great for this as well. So buffing your own stuff while clearing your opponent's stuff is amazing. Now, sometimes you won't have the perfect target, but you're just happy to have a really cheap AoE effect, because this essentially just does 1 to your opponent's board. Maybe you weave that together with a Condemn or something in order to clear your opponent's board with any random minion on your side. And then there's even use cases where you could use this on your opponent's stuff with real no downside. Like if your opponent played an Onyxia, for instance, and they had an 8/8 with a bunch of 1/1s, you could use this on the Onyxia to eat all the 1/1s and then just use like Shadow or Death or whatever to clear the Onyxia. So not necessarily terrible if you have to use it on your opponent's stuff, although sometimes it could certainly be less than ideal. So all in all, I think this card is a just really efficient AoE that has this kind of cool bonus or you're buffing your own stuff sometimes. And there might be scenarios where it doesn't even clear your opponent's board and you just want to add like, 5 or 6 health or something to whatever minion you have, a big taunt, like just soften up your opponent's board while stabilizing behind your big taunt. That might just be enough use case for this sometimes in a pinch where it doesn't even have to like satisfy a kill. It's just buffing it up. So all in all, I think this card is really cool, flexible, cheap, high output. I like this one a lot, actually. So next up here, we have the Forsaken Lieutenant, 2-mana 2/2 for Rogue with Stealth. And after you play a Death Rattle minion, become a 2/2 copy of it with Rush. So I think this card's actually pretty cool. Another little support for Death Rattle Rogue. We saw the objective in Rogue, which is going to double your Death Rattles for 3 turns. And, I thought that card looked pretty slow. It still does. And this card is also kind of about setting up for the future. But you might be able to get a critical mass and pop multiple Death Rattles in a single turn with a card like this one. So set up your Snowfall Graveyard objective, set up a Forsaken Lieutenant, and then have that one kind of big key Death Rattle. There's a couple that look okay. I think like Infiltrator Lillian kind of makes sense. where you just, swarm with a bunch of Forsaken Lillians. Even this guy's called Forsaken Lieutenant. They're all Forsaken characters. So, you can start seeing that coming together, right? So play this on 2, play the Graveyard on 3, play Lillian on 4. This guy has Rush once he transforms into Lillian, so you can trade him in immediately. Your opponent will generally have a board at that point. That will trigger the death rattle of Lillian twice, or this guy twice, I guess, which will make 2 4/2 summon and attack random things, which might be able to go face for a ton of pressure. So the catch-up mechanisms start coming together a little more clearly with cards like this one, where you have these multiple setup pieces for that big, like, mid-game payoff. And, you could do the same thing with, like, the 5-mana taunt thingy or the guy that summons a 5/8 taunt demon, right? And have some, like, big boards, some aggressive boards. So I kind of see it. I still think it sounds a little slow and a little too reactive and passive. There's some susceptibility here because this guy could die. Maybe doesn't have a great trade immediately, but there's this package starting to form, and I'm a little more hopeful for it. So this card has some cool aspects even outside of like exactly that scenario. He's just a 2/2 stealth, so that stickiness. If you just have 1 or 2 cool death rattles that you'll be playing on curve, that might alone make this worth it as a way to kind of duplicate those outside of like a full commitment to death rattle. So I think this is a solid little card, and I'm getting more hopeful over time here for these death rattle plays. Although I think normal rogue shenanigans and like crazy rogue pop off and aggression will still probably be a better deck. This may have some fringe viability. Moving on here to Demon Hunter, and I don't know if this is the final name for this one. It's translated, I think, but effect and everything's right. It's a 1-mana 1/3 weapon for Demon Hunter. Honorable kill. Deal damage equal to your hero's attack to the enemy hero. So the idea here is this weapon essentially allows you to trade into stuff while also still dealing face damage. So, if you play this with a Fury that's upgraded to 3 damage, you'll have 4 total damage. You could kill a 4 health minion while still dealing 4 damage to your opponent's face. And in some ways, I think that's kind of cool. Like, we saw that find some success with like those kind of burn soul fragment demon hunters back in the day. But they would use cards like Blade Dance, right? Like they'd buff up their weapon a bunch and then Blade Dance away their opponent's minions so they could still leverage their weapon while dealing face damage. And that was actually a pretty good game plan. That was a really good deck. This isn't quite so good because you don't have that Blade Dance that's making your weapon damage deal with a lot of stuff and deal with stuff without taking return damage, because you still have to whack into the enemy minion here to resolve this honorable kill. So yes, you deal with the enemy minion, but you don't deal with it quite as efficiently as you would have in other scenarios where this really worked well, which means like, if you're playing a face hunter or something and you want to kill their leftover trampling rhino, it's like, oh God, I'm going to take 5 just to deal a little extra damage to face while dealing with this thing. And I don't think that's like a race that pans out very well for you. You're just going to lose that face damage race. So, in other words, like, is this weapon really doing enough? Is it incrementing your game plan enough? Like, sure, it's a 1/3 weapon at a base. Sometimes that's just good enough. But there's other good, cheap weapons available to Demon Hunters. They don't really need to fill in that slot. So, that's not even discussing the fact that the honorable kill makes this sometimes very hard to work with, because you have, like, specific breakpoints of damage that you can achieve. Your opponent's not always going to have minions to set that up. So even when this works perfectly, I don't think it's that great. And then I don't actually think it's going to work very often at all. It's really hard to line up the right amounts of damage for a card like this one, because the damage you're adding to your weapon in Demon Hunter is kind of in like fixed increments. There's not a lot of like flexibility to play around with that without running just every damage adjustment card, So all in all, inconsistent. I don't even think it's that great when it works super well. And I think Demon Hunter has access to better weapons, better ways to kind of achieve this face versus minion clear balance. They've done that across a variety of decks now. So all in all, I just don't see Dread Prison Glaive making much sense. Sidan the Scarlet is a 4-star card. Forsaken Lieutenant is a 3-star card. Shadow Word Devour is a 4-star card. Dread Prison Glaive is a 2-star card. And there you go, that wraps it up for this review. As always, share your thoughts on these cards and more down below. I almost gave this guy 5 stars, by the way. I'm curious what you folks think. I think he might be really hard to deal with and snowball out of control for any decks that don't have hard removal, but curious to hear those thoughts and more in the comments. Thanks as always for watching, and until next time, Game on.